An important front in the war between Ukraine and Russia is the Black Sea. Undermining Russian dominance in the Black Sea is among the top priorities of Ukrainian forces. In this regard, we see that the recent efforts of Ukraine to intimidate the Russian Black Sea Fleet and remove Russian warships from the Ukrainian coast have been successful. The surface waves of the Ukrainian Navy have a critical importance in this sense. Ukraine's advanced unmanned surface attack boats and unmanned aerial vehicles attacked a Russian Navy ship for the second time this month after the ship Ivan Kursk. Another attack was carried out against the Vishnya-class ship Pryazovia. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that the spy ship Vishnya-class Pryazovia was attacked about 300 kilometers southwest of the Crimean city of Sevastopol. It was stated that 6 remotely controlled unmanned surface vehicles, Rusby Maritime, were used in the attack. At around 1:30 am. Moscow time, the Ukrainian armed forces attempted an unsuccessful attack on Pryazovia, the ship of the Black Sea Fleet, according to the Telegram channel of the Russian Defense Ministry. According to the statement, the ship was providing security on the routes of the Turkish Stream and Blue Stream natural gas pipelines in the southeast of the Black Sea. The Kremlin released a video claiming Pryazovia repelled the attack. It was stated in the video that all attack elements were destroyed with standard weapons. It was stated that there was no loss of life and the ship was not damaged. However, the fact that the video was shot in daylight raises questions about its authenticity. Moscow claimed that an Arc-4 Global Hawk surveillance drone of the U.S. Air Force was conducting reconnaissance activities in the airspace in the central part of the Black Sea. They implied that this reconnaissance was used to help Ukrainian and U.S. forces target the ship. Although the drones in the videos of the attacks are similar to the other drones used by Ukraine in the attacks in the Black Sea and Crimea, Ukraine has not officially claimed responsibility. This was the second such incident in recent weeks, along with the attack on the Russian ship Ivan Kursk in the Black Sea on May 24. It was claimed that there was no damage and no loss of life for both ships. On May 24, the attack on the Russian ship Ivan Kursk in the Black Sea was also widely discussed. In a written statement made by the Russian Ministry of Defense, it was announced that Ukraine's unmanned vehicles attacked the Kamikaze warship of the Russian Navy. This ship was in charge of protecting the Blue Stream and Turk Stream natural gas pipelines carrying gas to Turkey. One of Russia's most modern spy warships narrowly escaped being detonated by 3 drones in the Black Sea. Shocking footage emerged of the attack by Kiev's UAVs. The attempt to sink Ivan Kursk came as smoke rose from a massive £3 billion Crimean bridge controlled by Russia, raising suspicions that it was also under attack. The Yuri Ivanov-class Russian ship was in international waters in the Black Sea, approximately 40 nautical miles north of the Bosphorus at the time of the attack. Russian sources claimed in their first report that the UAVs were launched from civilian ships. However, they later stated that the Ukrainian armed forces were responsible for the attack. There was no clear explanation from the Russian side about the extent of the damage to Ivan Kursk in the Ukrainian attack. It was stated that the incident occurred at the entrance to the Bosphorus, which stretches from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean via Istanbul. Moscow reported that the ship protected the Turk Stream and Blue Stream pipelines during the attack. It was stated that despite the attack, the ship continued to fulfill its duties. According to the statement of the Russian Ministry of Defense on Telegram, all enemy boats were destroyed by fire from the standard weapons of the Russian ship 140 kilometers northeast of the Bosphorus. The ministry cited the attack as a reason for Russia to expand its defensive measures. Similar explosions occurred last September. In these explosions, the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines carrying gas from Russia via the Baltic Sea to Germany were damaged. So, what's the importance of the Black Sea, where the attacks took place? In the international arena, Russia and Turkey officially opened the Turk Stream pipeline, which has the capacity to transport 31.5 billion cubic meters of natural gas per year, in January 2020. The pipeline is used as Moscow's gateway to southern Europe via the Black Sea and Turkey. The Blue Stream pipeline bypasses Ukraine and carries Russian gas to Turkey. Turk Stream carries gas from Russia's Taman Peninsula to a point west of the Bosphorus. However, the Blue Stream crosses the eastern Black Sea from north to south and descends 700 kilometers east of the Bosphorus. In other words, these lines are of great importance in terms of opening Russian natural gas to the world. Ukraine's threats against the Russians on the Black Sea continue to increase. According to statements made by Russian authorities, a large number of UAVs have been detected and destroyed by air defense systems. Russian President Vladimir Putin was shaken by the news of this attack as the attacks intensify. Russian warships are withdrawing from Crimean waters. Russia has shifted most of its Black Sea Fleet warships from its main base in Crimea to safer waters on Russian soil. According to a senior Ukrainian military intelligence official, the Russian Naval High Command sent most of the ships of the Black Sea Fleet from Sevastopol to the Russian city of Novorossiysk. Ukraine's deputy head of military intelligence, Major General Vadim Skibitsky, said in an interview with the Kiev National Channel the other day that the Kremlin decided to relocate the ships for fear of missile attacks. We can say that Russian leader Putin is taking measures that show he is concerned about the attacks from Ukrainian forces. This decision of Russia came after the attack on the intelligence ship Pryazovia near Sevastopol. The official primary headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet is located in Sevastopol, the largest city in Crimea, and the site of numerous drone strikes in recent weeks. While Ukraine has not admitted responsibility for the drone strikes, the Kremlin-appointed Sebastopol governor, Mikhail Roswellasheyev, said Kiev was behind the attacks, which were reported to have caused a massive fire at an oil depot in the region the other day. Accordingly, Russia sent most of the ships of the Black Sea Fleet from Sevastopol to the Russian city of Novorossiysk. This base and other military facilities in Sevastopol are currently heavily guarded. Invaders have fortified their positions to protect against attacks on this infrastructure located on the eastern coast of the Black Sea in Russia's southern Kuban region. Novorossiysk is well outside the possible anti-ship missile launch areas in the Ukrainian-controlled area. After all, it is not surprising that Russia is considering moving its expensive ships from Sevastopol. It is possible that Russian planners predicted that if the Ukrainian attack allowed positioning closer to Russia's naval stations, the ships could come within range of missiles such as HIMARS. Thus, Putin's Black Sea dreams are disappearing day by day. After Moskva sank, Russia's Black Sea Fleet could no longer safely move along the Ukrainian coast. According to some reports, this fleet failed to make much impact in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Analysts also argue that Russia's northern fleet lacks the nuclear deterrence and tools to make a difference for Russia. But the collapse of Moskva particularly highlighted a threat, according to experts. Ukraine's dangerous stockpile of anti-ship missiles and the damage they cause not only to Russia's physical Black Sea Fleet but also to its reputation. Ukraine has strengthened the threat of anti-ship missiles, and the Russian Navy is struggling to deal with this threat. As a result, very strong psychological elements drove Russia away from the Ukrainian coast. Russia's naval fleet in the Black Sea largely remained close to its bases. The difficulty the Russians faced in the Black Sea was that they did not expect an anti-ship missile threat from Ukraine in the early days of the conflict. Now the construction of Neptune missiles, believed to have sunk Moskva, has been accelerated by Kiev. In short, Russia is forcing its fleet to keep their distance to avoid the fate of the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, Moskva. Russia's Black Sea Fleet was, in some respects at least, reduced to a coastal power. There is a suspicion that current assault weapons put naval power at a disadvantage, especially large, expensive ships that relatively inexpensive assault weapons can damage or destroy. The Ukrainian army effectively continues its massive offensive operations in all occupied territories. Currently, Ukraine's southern front lines are returning to the place of fire, while Kiev's offensive plans are slowly moving towards the original goal. In other words, the Ukrainians are starting to run towards victory towards the Crimean Peninsula. In fact, all the conditions seem suitable for this because the situation of the Russians is very critical in the southern Ukrainian front lines such as Melitopol, Tokmak and Kherson, especially after the recent flooding in Kherson. Many Russian trenches in this area were submerged. Currently, Ukrainian partisan groups in the cities of Melitopol and Tokmak are active on the ground for major offensive operations in Kiev. On the other hand, in Zaporizhia, Ukrainian assault brigades are still striving to create a link to the Crimea and clear the southern front lines of Russians. The resistance of the Ukrainians continues in coastal cities such as Berdyansk and Mariupol. These two port cities can also provide a superb perspective to Kiev from the Sea of Azov to the Russian coast. Considering all this, it seems inevitable that Ukrainian forces will liberate Crimea again. Currently, the armed forces of Ukraine regularly carry out airstrikes on the Crimea, which is the main target of offensive operations on the Zaporizhia front lines. The latest example of this has recently occurred in Sevastopol, one of the most strategic cities on the peninsula. While the critical situation of the Russian forces in Zaporizhia continued, the sudden turn of the clashes to the Crimean Peninsula shook the entire agenda. Let's explore all the details of the last drone attack, which deeply affected the peninsula, and take a look at the effects of this attack on the war. According to the occupation authorities established by Moscow, 9 drones were seen over Crimea late at night. It was reported that these drones targeted Sevastopol, one of the most important port cities of Crimea. This attack was the latest drone salvo against Russian forces on the peninsula. As the Ukrainians sought to isolate and ultimately liberate the area, Crimean official Sergei Aksyonov announced that 6 of the UAVs sent to the peninsula were shot down by air defense systems, and 3 of them were forced to land with electronic warfare vehicles. In addition, Aksyonov added that a drone was detonated in the village of Dokuchayev. Since this striking attack targeted the most important city of Crimea, Sevastopol, the Russians on the peninsula urgently began to take security measures in the region. For the Russians, the port city of Sevastopol is of great importance. Sevastopol is the main naval base of the Russian Navy in Crimea. Although there are efforts to distribute important assets to other bases such as Feodosia, large warships remain in port in this city. Therefore, after 9 drone attacks, the entrance to the port of Sevastopol is now protected by at least 6 layers of physical barriers. The original floating barriers at the entrance to the city's harbor stand to contain oil spills, as well as to prevent some sort of attack. We can clearly understand that the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, was very worried after the recent drone attacks as the defense barriers almost doubled. In addition, the Russians intensively engaged all security forces in the city from patrol boats, helicopter patrols, anti-diver military elements and weapon emplacements. It is reported that these preventative forces patrol the peninsula 24/7 and are on the alert for possible attacks. Indeed, the threat of attack by Ukraine's surface ships must have seemed both old-fashioned and unlikely to the Russians at the beginning of the war. However, the pre-existing floating boom in the harbor was occasionally turned off to prevent unauthorized boats from entering. Currently, this system is constantly active and is used to control Russian troops on the peninsula against any unmanned submarine attacks. Although the Russians have increased their security measures in Crimea, as you can see, the drone attacks on the peninsula seem to never end. In addition, although security measures are increased in Sevastopol, residents and people in other cities of Crimea are now aware that life on the peninsula will be very dangerous. Residents of Crimea think that the big offensive plans of the Ukrainians will continue here. You know that at the moment Ukraine's southern front lines are very complicated. But Ukrainians repeat over and over that the real aim is to liberate Crimea. Therefore, the people living on the peninsula continue their evacuation preparations at full speed to escape from here. Some residents of Crimea have already begun to flee the peninsula, selling their already held real estate. It is claimed that nearly 300,000 residents of the Crimea, which has a population of approximately 2.5 million, have fled the peninsula recently. The escape points are the safer areas on the Russian side of the Azov Sea. But Crimea's Azov Sea coast and the cities of this region on the Russian side are actually not very safe for Russians fleeing the peninsula. The reason for this is that the Ukrainians have the power to attack even distant cities such as Krasnodar, Rostov-on and Novorossiysk with drones, because waves of Ukrainians were seen many times in some of these cities. But the priority area that the Russians wanted to protect right now, of course, is the port city of Sevastopol, as we mentioned. Therefore, this city will remain a key target for Ukraine, especially if any planned counterattack takes place. On the other hand, Kiev was blamed for these latest drone attacks in Crimea. The Kiev authorities did not take responsibility for the recent airstrikes in Crimea, although the Russian administration claimed this. But the Defense Intelligence Agency of Ukraine urged pro-Kiev resistance groups in Crimea to contribute to them. The organization made a statement on the same day that drone attacks took place on the peninsula. In this statement, the Defense Intelligence Agency of Ukraine directed the residents of Crimea to provide information about Russian military and political commercial activities, as well as important military positions and supply centers. Agency officials argue that these information contributions could be decisive in restoring Ukraine's territorial integrity within its 1991 borders, because the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Agency believes that the more information they get about Crimea, the sooner the peninsula will be liberated. If the Ukrainians are in line with this goal, they organize not only information transfer, but also some activist actions on the peninsula. The Yellow Ribbon Civil Resistance Movement, founded after Russia's invasion of southern and eastern Ukraine in April 2022, hangs yellow ribbons around the occupied peninsula and distributes posters and leaflets aimed at undermining Russian narratives. In a post on the group's Telegram channel, it turned out that yellow ribbons are hanging en masse in Crimea, including the cities of Simferopol, Sevastopol, Yalta, and Feodosia. In the post, Ukrainian insurgents reported that they had hung a total of 400 yellow ribbons in these cities of Crimea. In other words, the resistance of the Ukrainian freedom movement in Crimea has reached its peak at the moment. The Russian authorities in Crimea want to block the actions of the Yellow Ribbon Civil Resistance Movement because they fear that the residents of the region will cooperate with the Ukrainian insurgents. For this, the Russian authorities in Crimea are installing security cameras all over the peninsula. Although the Russian authorities and Moscow-backed security forces on the peninsula tried to prevent these freedom actions of the Ukrainian resistance groups, participation in libertarian groups such as the Ukraine Defense Intelligence Agency is increasing day by day. The Russian administration, on the other hand, argues that these afflictions of the Ukrainians will not be enough for them to seize the peninsula. The liberation of the peninsula will take some time, according to some Ukrainian officials. But Ukrainian political and military officials say they cannot predict exactly when freedom will be possible. The Russians also began to worry a lot about when the specified day would come, but the Russian authorities are constantly trying to ignore and trivialize this danger, no matter how critical the situation in Crimea. These attacks ignored by Russia in the coming days may determine when Crimea will be liberated by the Ukrainians. The counteroffensive launched by the Ukraine in recent days continues unabated. According to the latest reports, the Ukrainian army's counterattack continues in 4 sectors, including Zaporizhia front line. The losses of the Russian army are increasing day by day. Let's examine the latest attacks on the front line together on the map. Let's start our map report today with the latest developments in the city of Bakhmut. The clashes in Bakhmut city continues uninterruptedly in the Bakhmut sector, where the clash is intensified. Baika is witnessing quite remarkable developments. As you can see on the map, Brega is about 8 km from Bakhmut. This city is of a great importance for the siege of Bakhmut North. In recent days, many local sources have reported that the Ukrainian Special Forces personnel have been conducting intensive operations in Bergitka countryside. According to unconfirmed reports, the Ukrainian army managed to penetrate several Russian positions in the areas east of the city center. The Ukrainian army's operational strategy in Bakhmut is based on failed offensive plan. Under this strategy, Ukrainian troops first capture positions where Russian troops are deployed. Then the offensive slows down for a while. During this time, the Ukrainian army prepares to achieve its other objectives and ensure for full control of the positions they have captured. The information that captured positions are fortified with the latest technology evaluation in the inventory of Ukrainian army is among the information shared by local sources. The latest developments in the Bakhmut region also need to be addressed by Russia. According to unconfirmed reports, the Russian army has started to shift its troops to Bakhmut from many points other than the Bakhmut line. This claim is quite remarkable. This move by Russia could be a fate changer for the Ukrainian army's counteroffensive. But in the event of this change, the Ukrainian army will be the one who will be in an advantageous position. So what would be the advantage of the Russia's move for Ukraine? Let's look at our map from a broader perspective and consider other fronts based on the information we have. We know that the fierce clashes of the Ukrainian counteroffensive took place along the Zaporizhia front line. This front line stretches from Volodar to Vasilivka. As you can see on the map, Bakhmut is very close to the area where the Russian army will deploy troops to Bakhmut. The Russian army, which has already suffered heavy losses on the Zaporizhia front and lost many areas, will have an increasingly difficult job in Zaporizhia. Speaking of Zaporizhia, we should mention an important developments on this front line. Let's look at Vasilivka, which is located at the southernmost end of this front line. About 17 kilometers northeast of this town is a town called Kamikaze. In recent days, we have been witnessing a large part of fighting around Vasilivka clustered around this point. The Ukrainian army has been reporting progress in the area, but the Russian army has been denying it. But now the Russians have admitted it to Kamikaze is under the control of the Ukrainian army. This is actually a small town. It is a rather insignificant area that both armies have been trying to seize ever since the Ukrainian counteroffensive began. So what makes this small town important? As you can see, the town of Kamikaze is located right on the major highway lines. The 2812 highway here runs all the way to Vasilivka, the southernmost part of Zaporizhia, the front line. So we can see Ukraine's capture of this area as a prelude to the liberation of Vasilivka. Likewise, this highway leads to Orikhiv, Polity, Berdyansk and Mariupol. The Ukrainian army's plan is not one-dimensional. The strategy here aims to achieve big goals with small moves. The recent attacks of the Ukrainian army on the town of Preteny in the city of Polity confirms this claim. Likewise, the Ukrainian army launched an attack on the town of Preteny after capturing the town of Kamikaze. The town of Preteny, located south of Novogeorgievka, which Ukraine managed to liberate from the Russian occupation in the past few days, is constantly being shelled by Ukrainian artillery in recent days. A large ammunition depot belonging to the Russia was destroyed by artillery shelling. According to local sources, the loss of Russian ammunition in the region is considerable. This is not the only development around Polo. Let's take a look at the Novodiluk on the map. This town is also located very close to arrive to the south of Novodanilovka. You can see the blue-colored areas liberated by the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army, which continues to operate in the south of this region, has gained a great superiority in the elevated areas in the region, according to the latest local reports. Furious clashes are taking place between the Ukrainian army, which is advancing in the region, and the Russian army, which is in the defense position. It seems quite likely that we will see this blue area grow in coming days. On the other hand, the Ukrainian army is waging a major war of attrition against the Russian troops behind the Zaporizhia front line. If you pay attention, the focus of the Ukrainian army's attacks in the area behind the front line is on ammunition depots, supply lines and tanks, which are the firepower of the Russian army. In recent days, Ukrainian artillery has targeted Russian targets in the town of Verbov, about 23 kilometers south of Orikhiv. As part of these attacks, the Ukrainian army targeted Russian ammunition depot armored vehicles and tanks, destroying NTT and MBT. In addition, a Russian assault unit is stationed around. This vehicle was also blown up together with the vehicle. Local sources are increasingly claiming that the Crimean region, which has been one of the quietest spots of the front line since the beginning of the war, has been experiencing activity in recent days. According to the allegations, Ukrainian and Russian troops are in a hot contact in the forested areas around Crimea. However, we do not yet have any confirmed information on this matter. Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Vladimir Havirov also recently made a series of statements about the Ukrainian counteroffensive. The deputy minister refrained from giving information about the scope of the counteroffensive and the latest situation that could disrupt the course of the counteroffensive, saying all our military plans are implemented according to forecasts and especially prepared simulations. So far, we have not encountered any developments that were not in line with our plans. The essence of modern warfare is to know the enemy's positions and master the situation in order to launch high-precision strikes over long distance. In other words, it is crucial to have weapons capable of destroying enemy's targets. Our inventory is very strong to achieve this goal for us. In many places, we are able to launch attacks against the occupation forces from a distance of up to 200 kilometers. What do you think? Do you think the Ukrainian army's capabilities are sufficient to end the Russian occupation? What is the reason for the unsuccessful defense of the Russian army on the front line? What is the reaction in Russia to liberation of the occupied territories by Ukraine? We care about your views. Thanks you for watching us.